German. I've decided recently that I want to start making video music reviews for YouTube. I love music, it's one of my favorite things, and I love talking about it. I like different kinds of music too, like not just one genre. I like, well, mostly rock and metal, but metal is my favorite, but I also like hard rock, classic rock, alternative, metalcore, stuff like that. I don't like pop or rap. I know that I respect that some people do, I just don't like it. I don't. But I really would like to show you something right now. This is my current CD collection. I'm proud of it, yet I also realize that it is small and needs a lot of work. But this is where every week I'm gonna try to put a video review up, and then I'm gonna take it from this, and every time I get a new CD I will also do an additional review for that. So I'm going to start at the beginning with this. As you can see, it's very well organized. Well, I don't know if you can see that, but it is. Then I'm going to start with AC/DC's High Voltage. Oh yeah, and one more thing. I will probably usually do these reviews on Fridays, but I didn't get the chance to do that. Alright, before I get on to the review, I would like to share some background information about the band and the album. AC/DC was formed in 1973 in Australia by brothers Angus and Malcolm Young. The original lineup was completely different than it was for this album. The only similarities was that Angus Young was and always has been on lead guitar, and Malcolm Young is and always has been on guitar. I guess rhythm guitar. They didn't even have Bon Scott yet. They had Dave Evans, and so once they got formed, they eventually played some gigs. Then they caught the attention of Albert Productions, who helped them get radio airplay, and eventually signed them a deal. Now, during this time, a couple of things have been going on with the band. Like, the lineup had been changing very rapidly, and Angus Young had been experimenting with costumes on stage. After many experimentations, he finally decided on his famous schoolboy outfit. If you're a fan of AC/DC, you know what I'm talking about, but if you're not, basically he played guitar on stage dressed as a schoolboy. So, also during this time, they had decided that Dave Evans was not a good singer for their band. He didn't really suit it. So instead, they fired him, and instead they got Bon Scott, the ex-singer of the band Fraternity, to sing for them. So when they got this record deal, they recorded it and released it in 1975 in Australia only. It is not this, but it was also titled High Voltage. And to this day, it still isn't available outside of Australia. Later that year, that same year, they recorded their second album titled TNT, also only available in Australia. Eventually, they caught the attention of Atlantic Records in London. They signed them a record deal to make an international album. So they recorded this album, and it was their international debut, and it was this album, High Voltage. It's basically a collection of songs from High Voltage and TNT. And, now, the album at first received very negative reviews from some critics. someone in Rolling Stone magazine even went as far to say as it was a new low point for hard rock. However, they went on to become one of the most famous bands in rock and roll history, and this album alone has sold over 3 million copies in the United States alone. They weren't even from here, they were from Australia. So that's saying something, and obviously that person, well, he isn't wrong, but he it didn't really come out the way he said. Like, people didn't agree, obviously. So on to the review. First of all, I'm going to do a song-by-song review.
It's a long way to the top if you wanna rock and roll.
The first song on the album is It's a Long Way to the Top If You Want to Rock and Roll. This is probably one of my favorites. It's a great way to start the album, and it is very unique in the sense that it uses the same electric guitar that they always use, but they also use bagpipes, and it actually comes out really good. So it's a really good song.
Gonna be a rock and roll singer. Gonna be a...
The next song, called The Rock and Roll Singer, is not as good as the first. However, it is more hard and has more of the in-your-face attitude that Bon Scott era AC/DC was famous for. It fully represents in its lyrics and music and melodies as the rebellious side of rock and roll and its stick-it-to-the-man attitude. Oh yeah, and both of these songs were originally from TNT.
She's got the jack. She's got the jack.
The next song, The Jack, is a very funny and hilarious bluesy song full of innuendo. And it's a very funny song. It's a very good addition to the album, and it's a minor classic. The fourth song, alright, first, I'd say the Jack was originally from TNT, but the fourth song is Live Wire. Live Wire is another one of my favorites, and it is a very, very good song. It is full of energy, and even though it takes it down, it takes a little slower than the rest of the album has, it is still just as hard and in your face. And it also has a more dark sound. And it's just awesome.
'Cause I'm TNT, I'm dynamite.
The fifth song is TNT. I'm pretty sure everybody has heard this song at one point, whether they know it or not. It is a definite classic, and it is on one of the best on the album. It's hard, it's mean, full of attitude, and it's pretty much reminds me of the theme song for The Ultimate Badass.
Can I sit next to you, girl? Can I sit next?
The sixth song is Can I Sit Next to You, Girl? It is another one of my favorites from the album. And it was actually the first song AC/DC ever recorded and released. But it was originally a Dave Evans song. They re-recorded it with Bon Scott for the TNT album. Actually, along with the song TNT, I forgot to say that. The seventh song, Little Lover, is actually my least favorite song on the album. It was actually one of the only songs originally from High Voltage, which is kind of ironic because the name of the album is High Voltage. Well, the original High Voltage, I mean. But, it's slow, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, but I just can't get into it like they can the rest of the songs. It's not bad. It's just not as good as the rest of it.
The lady's got balls. She's got
eighth song is She's Got Balls. It is supposedly written about Bon Scott's wife. And there's a very funny story behind that. I don't know if it's true, but apparently, according to something that was written, I think, on the Bonfire booklet, my friend told me this, and he's a huge AC/DC fan, so I'm pretty sure he knows what he's talking about. But his wife came up to him and said, "Oh, why don't you ever write a song about me?" So he wrote the song, and by the end of the year, they were divorced. And it's a very funny song. It's also very dirty, and it's a very good song too. And it is the only other song that was originally from the original High Voltage. The last song on the album is High Voltage, the title track. It is, I think, a little overrated, but it's definitely a classic, and it's good. And it's worth listening to. It's classic AC/DC, all about rock and roll, hard. It's great, it's good. And ironically, it was not from the original High Voltage, it was actually from TNT. Now I'm going to review the album overall. I think it is a very good debut, international debut, for AC/DC. It is far from their best, but it is also far from their worst. It is very good, and I recommend it if you are an AC/DC fan, if you are a hard rock fan who doesn't dislike AC/DC, or if you're not a fan of neither, but this review makes you want to pick it up. Go and do it. Unless you already have it. In which case, it's kind of pointless to do it again. But I like pretty much everything about it is good. The vocals, the guitar, the drumming, the bass, the production. It's not a perfect album, but it's very enjoyable. And the lyrics, it's your standard rock and roll, drugs, well, maybe not drugs, but sex, rock and roll, rebelliousness. Well, not all rock and roll has that, but AC/DC does. So yeah, it's very recommended. Highlights of the album would probably be, for me, It's a Long Way to the Top if you want to rock and roll, The Jack, Live Wire, TNT, Can I Sit Next to You Girl, She's Got Balls, High Voltage, just because it's classic. Well, there you have it. It's my High Voltage by AC/DC review. I'd like to conclude by saying that I will try to have another one up next Friday. I will continue with my AC/DC albums, reviewing those. I'm not going to tell you which one is next though, but you may be able to guess it. Put in your comments, see if you can guess which one I'm gonna do, just for fun. And then I'm also, next weekend, I'm going to try to get some new CDs, so the next week you may have up to 4 reviews, depending on when I actually get around to listening to them. I still have a couple that I haven't listened to yet, that I have in that collection over there, but I'll get around to it as soon as I can. So, until then, I'll see ya. Goodbye.